Love is a Gentle Stranger by June Masters Baker. Chapter 1. Jilted. The mid-September sun was without mercy. Dust eddied and swirled beneath the horses' hooves, settling on their sweat-lathered bodies as the team strained to pull the stagecoach up the steep mountainside. At times the horses missed their footing on the narrow trail. At those times the coach tilted crazily between the rock face of the mountain and the bottomless canyon below, throwing the 6 weary-faced passengers rudely against each other. "This heat takes all the energy a body can muster," the capable, prolific-looking woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Malone had said some miles back. It was probably to discourage the red-whiskered, gruff-voiced man beside her, Beth supposed. He had been talking since the group had gathered, some 4 days earlier, to wait for the northwest-bound stage. Not that Beth heard anything he or any of the others said. Their words were stifled by the turn of the wheels. "Jilted, jilted," they jeered. Jilted. Could there be an uglier word in the dictionary she had brought along? Had sickness or accident claimed John, I'd have lived through it, the girl thought. But this she could not survive. Not that she cared, as long as there were no knowing friends or relatives around to witness her humility and shame. "Be ye comin' west to be married?" The Irishman broke the silence. He seemed to be asking the question of her. Beth shook her head. "To teach," she said, and turned her eyes back to the dusty trail. "Oh, so it's a teacher ye be!" the Irishman exclaimed. "But how be it a pretty thing like you's a-travelling alone?" How be it? Still gazing vacantly at the timber outside the small window somebody had forgotten to curtain properly, Beth tried to put the reason together in her mind. Jonathan Blake had walked out of her life the way he had walked into it, airily but with determination. Although it had seemed a lifetime, there had been only 3 months between John's passionate whispers against her hair as the lilacs pouted with spring rain. "We have to set a date. I can't wait," and his equally impassioned plea for release in the magnolia-scented dark of a summer night. How could it be? John loved her. He had told her so soon after they met in Boston, his home, where she was finishing teacher training. They were going to be married. Invitations were ready. Beth had tried to reach out and touch him, but John had moved away. Didn't she hear what he said? Yes, she had heard, but she didn't believe. John was given to absurd, sudden laughter. That's it. He was teasing, wasn't he? She had asked. No, and she was pleased to make it no more painful than it was. Painful? For which of them? A new and sudden fear had gripped her heart then. Was there another woman? Yes. The wild pounding within her had stopped then. Beth felt her pulse slow to normal and then stop. Her body might go on living, but her heart had died. In the white, colorless days that followed, Beth was sure that her body would die too. "If I were a praying woman, I'd ask for death," she thought as she told her mother there was to be no wedding and to set to work on the grim task of returning the gifts. "I'd pray for tears too. They're supposed to heal," but the hurt was too deep for tears. Dry-eyed, she carried on. There was no purpose left, just one immediate goal, that of convincing friends that she herself had broken the engagement. After that, she would have to get away, where she didn't know, just far, far away. Her mother was no help, Beth remembered bitterly. She simply paced the long length of the carpeted parlor, wringing her hands and murmuring, "What will people say?" Soothing Mama and rewrapping the presents took a long time. Maybe if Vanjie were here to help, but her sister was now in Boston herself, registering for her first year in nursing school. Anyway, Vanjie was like Mama, a delightfully pretty lady who swooned at the sight of a mouse. So what was there to do but face the crisis the way she had faced all the others? Alone? Alone. Then why not be completely alone, away from them all? That's when the idea of coming west came. Remembering, Beth sucked her hand to choke back hysterical laughter. How ironic that it was John himself who gave her the idea. She had listened with a smile to stories he had gathered from wagon masters who were taking immigrants to some place called the Oregon Country. She knew she would never risk her scalp in such untamed wilderness. Fiddle-dee-dee, she would say when John got dangerously carried away with talk of gold, trees big enough to drive a team of horses through, grass belly-deep to the oxen they were driving, and rivers teeming with fish. Why would civilized, educated people like ourselves choose such a life? Still, there was a certain gleam in her husband-to-be's eyes that was contagious. Deep inside, Crispeth recognized an undeveloped sense of adventure in the self she believed she had inherited from the father who had died before she was born. The one photograph Mamma had kept when she remarried showed Crispeth that father and daughter resembled each other in a dark, straight-browed way. Undoubtedly, she was like him in other ways, too, a little withdrawn, and certainly with stronger backbone than her mother. The thought made Crispeth square her shoulders. Why not? She said aloud. Yes, why not go west? Pioneer children will have to have teachers. There was no sense of excitement in the decision, no feeling of dedication, no feeling at all. Oregon simply sounded like the farthest place away. Dangers of frontier life no longer mattered. In her numb state, she would welcome death. Lost in her reverie, Crispeth had no idea of time. It was a surprise when Mrs. Malone announced, "Supper time!" Without interest, she watched Mrs. Malone open the giant wicker hamper that had bumped over the dusty trails with them for however many days it had been since the stage had met the train 2 states back. Food. The idea of eating turned her stomach, but it would be easier to accept a cookie and some fruit than to argue with the well-meaning woman who had tried to mother them all. All I want is a warm bath, a clean bed, and the private world of sleep, she thought. Let the others talk about the beauty of the sunset, the increasing number of fir trees, and the fact that they would cross into Oregon tomorrow. Crispeth was aware only of a merciful breeze that pushed back her heavy hair, and the grind of the wheels that taunted, jilted, jilted. Covering her ears, Crispeth dozed fitfully. Her untasted cookie and fruit dropped into crumpled folds of the dark skirt she wore and rolled to the feet of Mrs. Malone. The older woman shook her head. "I do declare the child's not eaten a morsel." In her dreams, John returned. The rest of the world slept, and in that hushed and timeless silence the two of them were alone. "My darling." John's arms reached out to embrace her, but she was unable to touch him. Some evil force was pulling him away. "Come back," Crispeth tried to call. But John was gone, taking the silence with him. Mocking voices beat against her eardrums, indistinct at first, then loud and cruel. Jilted, jilted. Then John was back. "My darling!" This time, Chris cried out the words of endearment. But John was laughing and mocking her along with the other voices. She tried to run away, but her legs refused to support her. She was falling, only to have a bruising grip imprison her. No, no! She must fight against him. But struggling was no good. She was being lifted as if she were a feather, and the arms that held her were gentle. Gentle in a way she had never known John's arms to be. She tried to look into his eyes, but her weary eyelids drooped. The face was no longer familiar.